And coming up on today's show, is Royal Mail finally quitting rail after 194 years? Louise Haigh becomes Transport Secretary, and Network Rail Chair Lord Peter Hendy is appointed Rail Minister at the Department for Transport. We assess their intrays and key priorities. Richard goes underground in the Severn Tunnel. And brand new Northumberland Line fares are announced with some brilliant offers. So welcome to Green Signals, your railway podcast from me, Nigel Harris, here in Lincolnshire, as ever, and
equally as ever, or as usual, me, Richard Bowker, here in Wiltshire.
Indeed. And here we are again, Rich. Train talk again. What a way to spend your time. So, welcome to Green Signals. First, many thanks to those of you who have left us super thanks this week. And they are Ian Munday, Roland Harmer, James Negus, Robert Walsh, Neil Bennett and the Independent Brigline Rail Group, Chris Exley and Stephen Pritchard. Thanks so much to you all. It really is greatly appreciated. And that's by all three of us. We've done more work on our membership scheme, which we told you about in the last show. So thank you for all the feedback on that. And there's been plenty. It's very helpful and hopefully we'll be able to unveil it very soon. We've also made progress with the audio version membership. So it looks like YouTube scheme and the Spotify audio platform scheme will be able to launch pretty close together, which is good news.
It is indeed. And we also always like to give a shout out to listeners around the world. So this week we had Andrew who said, "Hi there, just wanted to mention that I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand. And I usually listen to the podcast whilst I'm doing model railway stuff at the weekend. Great show. Really good watch. Love the content and the interviews." So thanks for that, Andrew. And welcome to you from about as far away as it's possible to be from the UK.
Literally the other side of the world, isn't it? Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And if you're in some, sorry, I nearly said godforsaken part of the globe. No, I wouldn't say that. If you're in some far-flung clime, please let us know where you are and listening to Green Signals. It gives.
I have to say, Nigel, if you're actually sat in Christchurch, New Zealand, it's us that's in the far-flung clime. So, you know.
Yeah, it's
I
like,
don't know what you mean.
It's like people in Inverness regard people like you and me as Southerners, Richard. You know, it's all relative, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
But please let us know if you're wherever you're listening from. It does give us a really good feeling to know that we're reaching the part that other podcasts definitely don't reach. Right, we've had some breaking news literally just before we press record on this show. And it's one I know you and I are going to feel differently about, Richard. The Daily Mail ran this headline, exclusive, end of the line, ? Royal Mail to stop deliveries by railway after more than 200 years. Now, of course, it isn't actually more than 200 years. It's 194. But that's not really the concern, is it? I thought that headline's a bit naughty, don't you think, Richard?
Oh, well, it's the Daily Mail we're talking about. Anyway, yeah, it is a bit naughty because the article said Royal Mail is going to stop using rail to transport mail. You know, cue much emotion. Now, got to point out that only about 3% of post is actually moved by rail today anyway, but it is a very emotive thing, partly because, you know, the amount of time that rail and mail have been connected. But it is worth saying it is a very small percentage. Anyway, we did speak to Royal Mail to ask about this story, and quelle surprise, it's not quite as simple as the Daily Mail's made out, because the first thing the Royal Mail said is, "We will be continuing to use rail services." Yeah,
okay.
Well, quite. Then they said this: "The coverage you'll have seen today is about our freight trains, which are at the end of their operational lives," and by which we presume they mean their fleet of 15 Class 325 electric multiple units, which are about 30 years old, I guess. And then they went on to say, "Having reviewed options for the purchase of new trains, we determined the best solution was to use a combination of commercial rail services, our existing road network, and reduced domestic air services for the transportation of mail. They said it's becoming increasingly difficult to secure parts for maintenance of the trains, I guess, and the routes they need to meet their requirements.
Interesting. I'm not sure they've done that much to warrant sort of end of the working lives at 30 years, because they haven't done that many miles in comparison with the passenger units, have they, from which they were derived. But there you go, that's their story. So they're not actually stopping at all, Richard, and they plan to use GBRF or DB instead.
Well, yeah, that is certainly what they seem to suggest. I know, you kind of scratch your head
Never
a bit.
let the facts get in the way of a good story, eh?
No, but they did go on to provide some further guidance, and they suggested that the Daily Mail story might actually not be too far off the mark, because they said nationally the additional driving workload, and I presume they mean, with the trucks and stuff,
lorries,
will create more than 30 full-time driving jobs. Transporting more mail by road instead of rail will help improve reliability. Oh, here we go. As well as bring additional cost benefits. So, slightly mixed message here. They went on to talk about how they're the greenest delivery company in the UK. They've got 5,000 electric red vans. It's the largest EV fleet in the country, and their HGVs run partly on vegetable oil, which is a renewable alternative to diesel. And they claim that this move is broadly, which is an interesting word, isn't it? Broadly neutral in terms of CO2 emissions. So it does, at the end of all of that, sound like even if there is any more to be carried by rail on commercial services, it's going to be even less than the 3% we've got today.
I mean, just looking at that list of listening to what you said there through the maybe slightly cynical ear of 40 years as a news editor of sorts, there's a lot of word soup there, isn't there? I mean, the thing about being more reliable than rail stings, I suppose, and creating jobs and all the rest. It just does sound to me fairly thin.
It does, Nigel. And, the only thing I would say is, for reasons that I've no doubt we'll go on to talk about when we come to ministers' in trays, performance generally of the network's not been great, but actually freight's not been, too bad. So it does feel a little bit kind of mixed messages.
Hang on though, did they not invest a whole load of money in a Midlands super hub last year at Durft at Daventry, specifically because, wait for it, it was rail connected?
They did. You're absolutely right. Now, I suppose it's worth pointing out that they're now in the process of going through a sale. I don't know what the detail of that says. It's a sale to an international investor, which I think I'm right, goes in front of the shareholders in September for approval. But I believe the board have recommended it. So, who knows what's going on and what's changed. But you're absolutely right. They did. The Durft, which is Daventry International Rail Freight Terminal, is a 53-acre site. So it's, if you like, sort of comparison, there's about 30 football pitches with a rail link built specifically to it. And they did make a big thing about how they were taking trucks off the road.
Yes, they did.
They did. Now, Royal Mail have said no sites will be closing. So I guess that includes this one, but they could repurpose it, I suppose. And there are no job losses as a result of the decision. But we've asked them some more questions about what it does mean for the super hub at Durft, because the key there is the letter R. It's kind of rail.
Yeah.
But they haven't actually come back to us, and we had to record this, so we'll have to wait and see. But it does, as you say, beg the question, why invest so much and then change your mind so quickly thereafter?
The timing of this announcement and the imminent sale, again, to the cynical ear of a 40-year news hound, tells me there's a connection there, that whoever's buying the thing has maybe made things known, or they are seeking to impress, or whatever. I don't believe there's no connection.
It does feel kind of a bit coincidental. It's not great for politicians to have this one land on your desk. It is very emotive. And there is a kind of connection. And if you're trying to say, rail is better in terms of its green credentials, then it's problematic. But they say it's broadly neutral. So,
Look, I'm not daft, Richard. I get the point about the 3% and the tiny amount, but the famous word optics heaves into view here in a very loud manner. Yes, maybe the emissions and all the rest of it, but that doesn't do anything to address the congestion of all those extra lorries on the road. And it just doesn't feel right at a time of climate change and emissions and global warming and everything else to be taking stuff off electric trains and putting them onto the road, whether it's electric lorries or not. It just doesn't feel right.
It doesn't. One point that is worth maybe a bit more digging into in due course. One of the real challenges for any rail freight haulier is what is called EC for T, which is electric. I think it's electric current, electric charge for traction. It's basically how much money the rail operator has to pay Network Rail for the juice in the wires, and that price has gone up materially. It's one of the reasons why some rail freight operators have had to mothball or even sell electric locos.
Class 90s.
Yeah, because these charges are so big. I wonder whether the real issue here facing the railway and ministers and so forth is how to get those prices at a level that is affordable and competitive for rail operators.
But I just don't think it feels right. And, I don't want to get misty-eyed about it, Richard, though I am aware of the history and the emotions do play a part in all this because they do in the minds of voters as well, and they will get it. Last week it was the end of coal. Now it's the end of post. What next? A Bob Dylan song springs to mind, doesn't it? The times, they are a-changing.
Indeed they are.
We'll keep our eye on it, and we'll see what happens when Royal Mail come back and answer the rest of our questions, shall we?
Indeed.
Green signal, stand by. We will return to it. Let's move on for the time being to our railway news roundup. Do we need a little jingle there, Richard? Maybe I ought to perfect one and sing one, which I know you'd enjoy. Not.
Sorry, I've just had a little moment because I could swear you said sing one.
Or
you did.
Or you could do a little sting on the piano. Anyway, never mind.
Right,
News broke this week that LNER had made a thank you payment to managers for, according to a statement, leading teams through a challenging period for both LNER and the wider industry. The statement went on to say payments of this kind are not unusual and no payments have been made to senior managers. Following a pause for the election, we hope to restart talks with the unions as soon as possible to agree a pay deal for our frontline colleagues. There was an inevitably negative reaction to the news on social media, with many pointing out that it was a bit of a slap in the face for frontline staff who had borne the brunt of many of those challenges, especially when it came to have to deal face-to-face with many customers who were not exactly happy. Richard, I think you were surprised, weren't you?
Yeah, to put it mildly, because I thought the language was curious in the statement they gave us, because they talked about pay discussions with some staff. Well, that's not what this is. This isn't a pay discussion. This was effectively what I would call an ex gratia bonus. And I don't think there's any doubt that managers put in a proper shift. I mean, no one's suggesting otherwise. But the timing of it and the fact that they included one group and not the others.
Managers only.
Cloth-eared, I think, is the phrase that springs to mind. I just thought it lacked common sense, really. And that's probably being quite diplomatic. Anyway, there we go. We are hopefully going to get a bit more information on it in due course, but that's what we know for now. Moving on the news, there's a new video which has been released showing how the new £100 million Liverpool Baltic station could look. A 4-week consultation's begun on it. It's one of 4 new stations planned by recently re-elected Mayor Steve Rotherham, who's committed to the project, completing it by the end of 2027, which is actually slightly ahead of, I think, what was originally suggested. There's going to be 4 new stations in total, Daresbury, Woodchurch and Carmill, and they're also planned to be delivered by the end of the decade. So it will mean that every borough in the city region will have had a new station since Steve was first elected in 2017. I mean, the cost, 100 million quid. I guess it's because the platforms are subterranean, aren't they? So that's probably driving a lot of it. But some of these new station costs do actually sort of take you back a bit. Anyway.
Why Baltic?
I don't know.
No.
Is it not because it was the name of a sort of a warehouse? I don't know. We'll have to.
Funny enough, I was just thinking that. Well, I can see a warehouse with Baltic. Anyway, we'll doubtless find out.
I don't think it's because it's the frozen north,
No.
and I say that because I'm from Manchester, originally near Manchester, and you're from even more north. So there you go.
Which is near the Arctic Circle and therefore colder.
It's a well-known geographical fact.
Completely. Yeah. The fact that Blackburn's nearer the equator than Burnley is just it is what it is. Anyway, this is a shocking story. On June 27th, there were 5 incidents of railway vandalism reported near the village of Sileby in Leicestershire, south of Loughborough, in the space of 100 minutes. Train windows were smashed by thrown stones. Trains hit items that had been deliberately put on the tracks, including a metal road sign and part of a trampoline. And in one incident, a driver saw some youths placing objects on the tracks and stopped to clear the debris away. East Midlands Railway, BTP and Network Rail are now urging parents in Sileby to ensure their children understand the severe consequences of trespassing and vandalism on the railway. Those kids are lucky that nothing worse happened that day than some broken windows.
They certainly are. Finally, one good bit of news this week was the fact that Tyne Wear Metro has started, indeed completed, I think, quite a lot of its daytime running with its new trains. And the one been to Sunderland, I think one's been to South Shields. So they're cracking on with that. They do look fabulous, those trains, I have to say. So we're hoping to go and visit Tyne Wear Metro in the near future and have a good look. And we'll bring a video of that when it's ready. And that, I'm pleased to say, is the news roundup for this week.
Just a postscript. I'm a huge fan of Tyne Wear Metro. And just on the time it takes to get stuff done, it was actually Philip Hammond who approved those trains. So that just shows how long it takes to get this.
That's a while ago, isn't it?
This stuff done. Right. So setting aside for a moment I Think You'll Find Brigade, please take note. The Channel Tunnel and the Elizabeth Line, Britain's longest mainline railway tunnel, is, of course, the Severn Tunnel, connecting Wales and England under the Severn Estuary between Gloucestershire and Monmouthshire. At 4 miles and 624 yards long, or a few metres over 7 kilometres, if you prefer metric, it's a monster just in terms of its length. But it's even more challenging than that. During construction, engineers discovered a natural spring in 1879, which runs to this day. And that great spring is still pouring 50 million litres of water per day into the tunnel, which, of course, must be pumped out. And I think it's sold to Welsh Water, isn't it, Richard? From the 3rd to the 19th of July this year, the tunnel closed for a major track renewal, and at Network Rail's kind invitation, Richard dragged on his high-vis and hard hat, and he went underground to have a look. Take a look at this.
Everybody loves a highest or a tallest or a longest or a deepest. And today is going to be no exception, because today I get the opportunity to go and see Britain's longest railway tunnel, the Severn Tunnel, whilst some major track works are being undertaken. It's a real treat, and not something you get the opportunity to do very often. The weather's not the greatest. It's a typical English summer. But you know what? It doesn't matter today, because today we're going underground. So here we are at the access point for the Severn Tunnel on the English side. This is where the car park is for all the contractors' vehicles, where we're going to be able to get down into the tunnel. My host for the day was good friend and Green Signals regular Nick Millington, MBE, Route Director for the Wales and Borders region of Network Rail. I asked Nick to give me an overview of the project
And what's involved?
So we are now on the English side of the Severn Tunnel,
Yep.
so not far from Bristol.
Yeah.
And we are currently undertaking a 16-day closure of the railway to renew 4 miles, which is one of the railway lines underneath the River Severn.
Oh, you're just doing one. You're just doing one side.
So
right.
we're doing the
okay.
down line, so
Yeah.
the line from Bristol heading into South Wales. The tunnel is 7,000 metres long. It's a big tunnel.
Wow.
And we are renewing all of the track on one side, so the down line all the way from Bristol into South Wales.
Safety is always the number one priority on the railway, and this particular work site was both hostile and complex. The safety briefing was thorough and detailed. I even got a little tag which attached to my helmet, which vibrated when I came in close proximity with one of the road rail vehicles used in the tunnel. Soon we were on the short walk off to the tunnel and the climb down to the tunnel mouth itself. The tunnel portal itself is pretty dramatic, and immediately it was apparent that water and corrosion of the overhead conductor rail is a significant issue. That too needs regular replacement. We started our walk into the tunnel and immediately you could see where fresh ballast and fresh rail had been laid. Here's Nick again.
So we have a cycle of renewals. The track in the Severn Tunnel has about a 10-year lifespan. Over that 10 years, we cycle in and out on which line that we do, so we can't do it all at once. We recently, when I say recently, in the last 10 years, we electrified the railway from London to Cardiff, which meant that we had to slightly alter the track renewal frequencies.
Right.
Because we were electrifying the railway.
Yeah.
So what we're doing here today is we're catching up some of that frequency, which was obviously planned, and the catch-up is planned. Get around the catch bit. You don't want to damage the catch bit or have movement on the catch bit, otherwise the drains fill up.
Our limit of excavation, when we dig this out, you might see it when closer in there, we're limited as to how deep we dig our excavation. Outside, we dig down 300 mils worth of bottom stone. In here, we're only going 200 mil because we do not want to nick like the brick arch that sits in this and has this culvert for fear of collapse. Because if that collapsed, we'd be in trouble. And we're not sure how that sort of self-repair would work out.
This is a £10 million job, isn't it? I mean, it's huge.
It's huge.
What? Just give us a sense of the scale of what's involved. Yeah.
So we, on any one day, we'll have about 200 people here working between here and the tunnel. We've got 40 engineering trains, which come from all over the place,
Right.
come into the tunnel, and they're in a permanent cycle over 16 days. We've got 20,000 tonnes of material to take out, 20,000 tonnes of material to take back.
Yeah.
We've got 11,000 sleepers, 60 continuously welded rails. The logistics are quite large.
It's extraordinary, isn't
It's
it?
massive. What we've got here, on this piece of work, we've got all the way through, we've got 60 pieces of long welded rail. So there's 700-foot pieces of rail that we drop in advance of the work. So this is where 2 of those 700-foot pieces of rail join. So that's a thermic weld. We cast it in situ here. You can see there, that's the weld. That's the 2 pieces of separate rail. The welder, they've got their own personal stamp that we keep in a register that's aligned to their competence. Then within 28 days, you've got to then certify the weld, because you get things, sometimes you get imperfections in the weld. So the key in the tunnel here, you don't want to leave it 28 days. You want to know if there's a defect in that weld, because if there is, you want to get it out quickly. So welded, stamped, job done.
Construction of the Severn Tunnel began in 1873. It took 13 years, so finished in 1886, and dramatically reduced the travelling time between South Wales and Western England. And when it was opened, it was the longest underwater tunnel in the world and remained so until 1987. On average, 50 million litres of spring water are pumped out of the tunnel each day by the Sudbrook pumping station on the Welsh side, without which the tunnel would quickly flood. This is the biggest single track renewal in the tunnel in living memory. A project such as this is planned more than 2 years in advance, and Network Rail were able to avoid all 4 concerts at the Principality Stadium that have taken place in the summer. They avoided the Glastonbury Festival, and of course, because it's the railway, there's a diversionary route via Gloucester, so the trains can keep running.
So I'm here right in the middle of the tunnel, actually. This is virtually the midpoint. We're obviously coming from the English side, and we're at the bottom now, and the Welsh side is behind me. So right in the centre of this extraordinarily long, and it has to be said, quite eerie tunnel.
Our visit had been arranged especially for members of the media, and so when we got to the centre of the tunnel, we paused, and interviews and filming and photographs were carried out. I had a chance to have a good look around and just see the scale of this project, but eventually it was my opportunity to have another chat with Nick.
Nick, whereabouts are we in relation to where we started in terms of in terms of the tunnel itself?
So, Richard, in one of your quizzes recently, you mentioned about an operational blue light.
Indeed.
And the operational blue light is just over there on the wall. And that is the change of gradient, and we're in the middle of the Severn Tunnel. So we're about 2 miles into the Severn Tunnel.
What I find quite odd about this, there's quite a wind blowing through here. What is that a pressure change across the length of the tunnel? How does that work?
So we've got shafts, risers,
Yep.
and we've got fans in the tunnel. We're doing engineering work at the moment, and we switch the fans on, and then we create a positive air pressure to recycle to refresh the air in the tunnel.
Okay, so it's just keeping the air quality high. Got it. What is it, though, that makes this such a hostile environment? I know we've got all sorts of things going on in here. So
We have got all sorts of things going on here. So above us, obviously, we've got the River Severn.
yeah.
We've got water that bears in on the structure. We've got sulfur-eating bacteria. If you look at from days of old, you can look on the tunnel walls. There's all sorts of deposits from coal trains and other materials trains. It is a damp and caustic environment, and the railway assets only last so long.
So roughly how long would track last in here then?
So the track renewals in the tunnel, so we've got 2 lines, up and down line, 4 miles on each, and we renew this track every 10 years. So it's got quite a short lifespan.
Okay, but we're just doing one line on this occasion. That's
So-
presumably to stagger the work, is
That's
it?
it. You can't do it all at once.
Yeah.
Although we're having a good go at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're on the down line. So where I am now is where the railway should be. The renewal is underway just there. So 4 miles from Bristol into South Wales on the down line, over 16 days right now, we are renewing the whole of the down line. So 4 miles of continuous track renewals,
Yeah.
a £10 million project.
One of the things that is really striking about this is the multiple points of potential failure.
Yeah.
So presumably you're also taking the opportunity, when you see something, if
Yeah.
you're down here with a blockade,
Yeah.
you're trying to sort that out as well?
We've got a lot of things underway all at once, yeah. So there'll be vegetation. We've got other drainage work outside
Yeah.
of the tunnel. Also, we're very, if I mentioned earlier, every day now we pump 11 million gallons of water out of the tunnel every day now because of the freshwater
Yeah.
spring. And I don't know if viewers or listeners can hear, but there's a drainage system right beside us here. We've got to be very, very careful not to damage it,
Yeah.
because we'll get a flood.
Yeah.
So the work we've got to do it's quite intricate, albeit you can see we're doing it with big machinery.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely incredible. Just finally, how many people involved on a project like this?
So each 24-hour cycle, people don't work around the clock, obviously they work shifts, but in a 24-hour cycle there'll be 200 people working down here in the tunnel.
And this is £10 million
£10 million.
to keep the main line between Wales and England running
Yeah.
reliably and safely for
That's it.
to come.
We did half the up line last year.
Yeah.
We're doing the whole of the down line this year.
Yeah.
We're catching up a planned backlog from the Great Western Electrification 5 years ago.
Right.
And that cycle continues.
Yeah.
It is an absolutely extraordinary project. The undertaking is amazing. Just the logistics, the equipment, the planning, everything that goes into making something like this work so incredibly efficiently. But then it was time to jump on the works train and head out the tunnel for a really rather splendid ride And it has to be said, a slightly easier and less strenuous trip than walking in the first place. Soon we reached the portal of the tunnel and we came back out into the daylight to reflect on what had been a truly memorable and interesting visit.
So that was, look, Richard, I've been doing this job 40 years and I've never lost sight of the enormous privilege that people like you and I have been able to do stuff like this. But going down the Severn Tunnel's got to be a bit special, hasn't it? Especially that ride in that funny little buggy thing. That's one for your diary.
Do you know, it was a media visit, so there were folks there from the BBC and ITV, sort of regional news. But what was fascinating about it, that everybody who was there suddenly realised this is really cool. This is actually quite a treat. You just don't get the opportunity to go down there. So no, absolutely, I think everybody got it, and it was pretty amazing.
And Nick Millington, bless him, is the perfect MD, isn't he, in terms of the way he deals with media and people, and he always comes across the right ways. He's such an asset. What I did enjoy in that was your sight of the blue lights,
Yes.
which was the subject of the quiz, which even Nick mentioned, didn't he?
He did. Yes.
But in that very brief shot you have, I know the telephoto lens foreshortens it and everything else, but my goodness, the very noticeable change in gradient having come down one side, the level bit at the bottom, and you can see in the distance of that shot how it takes off like it's going up a roller coaster. Fascinating to see.
It wasn't it just, and you suddenly realise, because we had those festoon lights or whatever they're called, that hanging up on the side of the wall so we could actually see, but ordinarily we're pitch black in there. So they wouldn't be able to see that change of gradient, hence the blue lights. But it was dramatic. And again, another thing you rarely get to see because it happens to be lit at the moment. I mean, you mentioned about the team. Nick's great. Ross Mahoney, who was also there, the track director for Wales and Western. The whole team, actually, it was really impressive. And they were obviously proud of it. The one thing you can't really get the sense of in that video, Nigel, is just how tight it is. I know it's a double track main line, but it's got this overhead catenary, so they're conductor rail rather than obviously hanging cable. But wow, to move machinery around in there, really very difficult. And, a testament to their skill and their organisation and the bits of kit they got. But it was a brilliant trip, and I hope people enjoyed it.
There was one particular shot that you had of effectively a train of working gear and workers going by with a road railer in the middle providing the power. And I just thought, there's some fantastic yellow kit available now, isn't there? Which is, specialist for working down in a tunnel. You mentioned there the overheads. The fact it's solid bar catenary rather than cable is again of interest. And they can't fight a constant battle against a very hostile environment, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, there's no bigger story during the last week than the general election, which produced many, many plots and subplots, of course. But overall, Labour won by a thumping landslide. It was predicted, of course, so hardly a surprise, and very clear from the moment at 10 o'clock on polling day that the exit poll was published on TV, but still remarkable given the state of the poll in 2019, when Labour had its worst result since 1935, and everybody, smart money, even my money, was said it had taken 10 years to get back into contention. So Keir Starmer has done quite a job. But Richard, being our stats man, you've been having some fun with the numbers.
I have. Now, I've got to be honest, I'm no Sir John Curtis.
True.
Right. Oh, thanks very much. But I have delved a little deeper and, found out some quite interesting facts. There's a few things here which are just worth maybe having a bit of a discussion about.
Yeah.
This obviously isn't Labour's biggest majority. I mean, it almost is, but Tony Blair's majority in 1997 was marginally bigger.
But I
understand.
understand.
Only a handful of seats, but yeah.
But I understand that Starmer got fewer votes than Corbyn did in 2019.
I think when you adjust it for the turnout, I mean, that would come on to that point because that is really very material. it is the worst Conservative result ever. Right, that is true. 121 seats, losing 251. Their next worst result was in 1906, when, together with the Liberal Unionists,
landslide.
they won 156 back then. I mean, extraordinary. Even though Blair's majority was bigger in 1997, the Conservatives managed to win 165 seats. So 44 more than they did this time. Right?
So, Rishi, how did canning HS2 work out as a political a move for political gain?
It was irrelevant, really, wasn't it, to the election? Transport always is. But here's what's fascinating about it, I think. The turnout was the second lowest since 1885. It was only around 60%.
Oh, right, okay.
But the fabulous stat, if you're into numbers, is the ratio between the share of the vote to the seats won. Okay. So Labour won 63% of the seats with just 34% of the vote.
Wow.
So that is almost 30 percentage points difference. That's the biggest that's ever been.
Really?
Yeah. The Conservatives won 19% of the seats with 24% of the vote. Now, nowhere is the distortion caused or the effect of first past the post made more clear by what happened with Reform and the Lib Dems. So, Reform got 14% of the vote, which is a big number, but 1% of the seats, whereas the Lib Dems got 12% of the vote, so less than Reform, and 11% of the seats. Right? So that's what happens with first past the post. Interestingly, I think, had this been a proportional representation election, a Conservative Lib Dem coalition would have actually, I think, been the biggest group in Parliament, as it was in 2010. But the other big story of the night was the almost wipeout of the SNP in Scotland. Clearly,
40
they went
seats or thereabouts, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 39 seats. They went from 48 to 9. With Labour winning 36. So back to your point about Jeremy Corbyn, Labour did not materially increase the share of the vote. In fact, the only reason it went up at all was because of Scotland, right? Yeah. And Labour did not convince swathes of the population to switch to Labour. They didn't at all. They ended up with basically the same share of the vote than they had before. They got that majority because the vote of the right got split. For whatever reason, whether people decided to punish the Tories in Tory seats or in marginal seats or tactical voting or people voting for reform,
or stay
whatever
at home.
The reason was, that's what happened. Labour rode in, if you like, partly off the back of everyone, the Conservative collapse. So very interesting.
It certainly is, and as a confirmed admirer of More or Less on Radio 4, which is all about numbers and brilliant, as interesting as it all is, Richard, does it really matter? Surely a win is a win is a win, and Labour will now just steam ahead with changing every department, surely.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. A win's a win's a win, isn't it? Now, will they steam ahead in every department? Okay, well, look, this is highly speculative. I think there's a number of reasons why it won't be quite as straightforward as that. For a start, being a party in opposition is not the same as being a party in government. Having said that, their start has been highly energetic. It was very similar to the Blair victory in 97. Lots of stuff happened very short space of time. The public finances are really tight. Really tight. And growth is vital for Labour because it's a little bit like the railway, really. The best way to sort yourself out a crisis is grow your way out by getting more passengers, more revenue.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that about what Labour need to do. I'll tell you one thing that I do find odd, which is that, and I remember Alistair Darling saying something to me along these very similar lines back in sort of 2002. So the problem of having big majorities is there's not that many jobs that are meaningful in government to go round a lot of people, right? So Keir Starmer's got 412 MPs, and I think there's only something like 100 ministerial jobs,
including
and that's at every level.
all the junior ones that
including like the really basic ones, yeah.
Minister
So
for
that's
gathering
already
eggs
going to
or
be
whatever.
300 odd people that are not happy. So it's interesting that quite a lot of jobs have gone to people from, if you like, from outside of government. Peter Hendy, obviously, we'll come on to him in a minute.
Timpson.
James Timpson, the shoe and key guy, he's got a ministerial job. Jackie Smith's come back into the Lords. She's got a ministerial job. Spencer Livermore's got a ministerial job. That's interesting. I think could be some quite unhappy MPs, and I don't think he's going to get quite the honeymoon that arguably Blair got in 97.
It's harking back to Gordon Brown's goat thing, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, that's a good memory. That it does feel a little bit like that. Now, if you want to be really positive about it, and that's the only way to really be, isn't it, with these things, you say what he was doing is getting people in the job is going to make a difference.
Who know what they're talking about.
Know their stuff. I mean, and it's all about outcomes, right? And I'll manage all that other stuff.
But
fair enough.
He does seem to have made a good start. He hit the ground running. You only get the one chance to make a first impression, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think he's done a reasonable job with the various speeches I've seen him give, either in Parliament or everywhere else. And he seems to have got off on the right foot. Okay, so let's focus on what we're really interested in, transport generally and railways specifically. The first bit of excellent news was the confirmation, as we all expected or hoped, that Louise Haigh has been confirmed as Secretary of State for Transport. Excellent because of the detailed knowledge of the brief Ms. Haigh will have gained in her shadow role. She talked a lot to the right people, it would seem, and we both liked her plan, didn't we, Richard? The second bit of excellent news, which was unexpected and I have to say gobsmacking, my jaw fell when from the radio I heard that Lord Peter Hendy has been appointed as a Minister of State at the DFT, otherwise known as Rail Minister. I'm pretty sure that news must have caught most people by surprise, probably including Peter as well, but we'll never know that. Did you surprise you, Richard?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if anybody's out there listening to this or listening to all of this stuff generally thinks, no, I saw that coming.
Nah.
I don't believe you.
Lies.
I really don't believe you. I think that was an extraordinary move. But obviously, as you say, I mean, a great one.
The questions are in the open, aren't they, though, or lying there? What will he be able to actually do as a minister? He's one man, and all right, he's in an influential position. He'll be in the room when the decisions are made. But he's not actually doing the job out there, is he? What does it mean for Network Rail? What does it mean for GBR?
Look, it's a fair question. I mean, it's a challenge being a minister. As the conversation we had with Hugh Merriman, if a similar sort of thing. Lots of ideas, lots of passion, but in the end has to follow the line. But that means Peter may well be entirely comfortable with that. I think he's his own guy, he's his own person. Wouldn't have done it if he didn't believe that he could kind of get behind the program, if I can call it that. One thing I would say about Peter is, and I've known him for a long, long time, he is an extraordinarily gifted communicator.
Oh God, yes.
And has this wonderful ability to speak with and connect and engage with people at every level. Doesn't matter what the job is, as long as they're excited, passionate, and love the railway and all the transport generally, then he will connect and he will engage. And he's truly gifted at that. And I think when it comes to this role, that's going to stand him and all of us in tremendous stead.
Yes, from boardroom to ballast, can't he? He can do the whole lot, and that is something you cannot learn. You've either got it or you haven't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Peter's absolutely got it in spades. And as a minister, I think that will be doing very well. But where on earth do Louise and Peter, and indeed Lillian Greenwood, start?
It's actually a very, very fair question.
I mean, there's this mass, isn't there? Where do you say, right, we're going to do that?
Well, I think one thing that's very important to kind of appreciate before we even answer that is to recognise that the ministerial team is really only one part of the jigsaw, a hugely important part of it. Let's be clear, this is crucial stuff. But a little bit, I know you love your football analogies, but a a little. I know you are from Burnley after all, I suppose. But with a football team, 11 strikers, you're going to lose. 11 defenders, you're going to lose. Right? You need a balance of skills and all the rest of it.
And then use them properly. Even I know that.
No, that is true, actually. Anyway, we'll see what happens when England take on the Netherlands later. But that's really, really important. So, and they're savvy enough to know that. I mean, that is a bunch of ministers who really do get it. And if you look at everything that Louise said in the rail policy document, it's clear that that is understood. But if you read the social media comments since last week, everybody thinks, right, it'll all get fixed now. And it's clearly not. So I think the first and most crucial thing to say is that the rest of the team and the process needs to be complete to really get this thing going.
Because Louise has made some comment. I can't remember exactly what it was she said, but we're going to get stuck in and do things fast, didn't she?
It was something like, we're going to move fast and fix stuff. Or
That's
get
right.
Stuff fixed.
So, but if you're going to do that, you've really got to pick your targets. So you need to boil down to priorities, don't you? So,
yes.
What do you think of that there?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. So what I did was I went back to the rail policy paper on, I think it was 25th of April, called Get Britain Moving. And I went back to that and I had a good look at it again and said, what was it, arguably, that, I suppose attracted us to it then? What did it say that made us go, yeah, this is a good plan? And for me, this what I would call sort of 6 core things, which we've talked about, which I think boil down neatly into things you've got to do like right now, and things that you've got to do fairly quickly, but they don't have to, they can take a little bit longer, i.e. a few months.
So what we have is the Green Signal's 6-point plan for Louise. The media likes point plans. Well, this is our 6-point plan. So shall we work through them and reel them off, and you can have a bit of a go about each one. Number 1, and this won't be a surprise to anybody because we've both said it lots, is performance improvement, operational recovery, and industrial relations.
And here's an interesting thing. So in that, industrial relations has been included within operational recovery and performance improvement. It's not sat there entirely in splendid isolation on its own, right? And that's quite deliberate. Performance across the network is not good enough. You cannot run a railway network, certainly in my view, I know you share the same view, by some form of, really almost like democratic process. This is not where you sit around you don't sit around the campfire singing Kumbaya, don't you? Sometimes someone's got to go, we have to do this, right? And some people in that process are not going to like it. So performance improvement is really about getting back to the raw basics of how to run a railway properly. And that is done best when there is a hierarchy and there is a structure. That doesn't mean that, you just tell everybody what to do, but ultimately somebody has to make the big calls. And I think that's absolutely critical.
And that's the directive mind, isn't it? And you're right about that. If there's one thing that's proved that you cannot run the railway by consensus, it's the ongoing failure to produce a timetable for the East Coast Main Line. It all comes together and shows that, doesn't it? And we discussed this on the show a few weeks ago, and you came out with a memorable quote that I've been chuckling about ever since. You said, if memory serves me right, you do this, you do that, and you can off. So we do need to see that, don't we?
We do.
We need a directing mind, and I'm sure Lord Hendy, Minister of State, will give us a view on that fairly soon. Okay.
Well,
and you're right about IR as well, because
that's what I was just going to say.
It's part of the overall thing, isn't it? It's not something on its own.
It's not. It probably has to have an element of political fix about it because of where we've got to.
Yeah.
But people need to remember that when a deal gets done around that, the implementation of what that deal means is done at a local level, effectively, right? So the operational consequences of, rosters and terms and conditions and all that stuff, quite detailed, quite complex, gets done at the local level. So you can't do industry relations in splendid isolation.
No.
It's got to be part of doing the whole thing together.
It's not a separate thing. All right, point number 2, very short, 5-letter word, costs.
We're going with that. Costs. This is the one that is really vexing for some people. One of the problems that's befuddled the railway sector, I think, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, really, is whenever we try and fix a problem, it always ends up being massive teams and massive processes, and it takes forever.
Nothing's
and it all
ever
gets
easy, is it?
bogged down in complexity and bureaucracy. My approach to cost is quite different. What you do is you get really small, agile groups, right, of people. And the second that your team gets more than about 4 or 5 people, my view is it's got too big, right? It just doesn't become unwieldy. And take a series of projects that we all know are a bit too expensive. You know, there's a well-known station was one example of that, but it's symptomatic of a wider issue. And fix them, drill down, literally be really aggressive and understand why things cost what they cost. And then you've got a template to roll out to other places. Because I'll tell you this, Nigel, if we do not get a grip of costs, there will not be enough money to go around. So this is vital. But don't try and fix everything day one. Take some examples, shake them to death, work out where the problems are, and then replicate them.
Yeah, and that'll inspire other people to do the same thing with other areas.
Yeah.
It's one thing that Bill Reeve in Scotland has gone on about at great length about exactly that. These things just cost too much and nobody delves into it to find out why.
Yep.
Okay, number 3. Shall we move on?
Yep.
It's not a 5-letter word this time. It starts with C and ends with S, costs. It's several words. The integration of operations, prepare to bring back in-house.
Yeah, so this needs a plan, because what Labour has said is we're going to renationalise operations. We're going to bring all the contracts back into the centre as they expire. Fine, that's the plan. But that won't happen overnight, so it needs a plan to do it. But again, let's not overcomplicate it. It's not beyond the wit of man to do that. It just needs a plan. And I would say it probably is, again, relatively small team, very agile, very focused, come up plan with that. But it does need a work stream, and it needs to be done pretty quickly, because you don't want to be caught by surprise. You know, these things will start to happen.
Here we go. We'll continue with the game. Number 4, another 5-letter word, begins with F and ends in S, and that's fares.
Yeah, now, so we've moved into the second group of 3, because the operational performance improvement, industry relations, costs, and getting ready for the contracts coming back, those are things that have to happen immediately. And you know what? I'd say almost like right now. You know, I'd want to see a team set up and running on all those 3 things in a matter of days, right? And there's no reason why that can't happen, by the way. When it comes to fares, it is a little more complex, right? But we sometimes go through this process of we've got to fix every possible problem before we do anything. No, the beauty of fares is you can actually test and check, and you get the data back almost immediately, and then you tweak again. There's enough brilliant people in the industry who really understand this, you know, how yield management, how fare systems work. And there's plenty of people outside who can help. So, you know, you've got Mark Smith on, who's, you know, a real understanding of this. But within the industry, you know, David Horn really understands it.
People like
Rufus Boyd really understand it. And I think with fares, we've actually got to be brave and be prepared to give a few things a go. It's too complex, and it's putting people off. So fares, big issue.
Number 5, supply chain.
This is very important. We've talked on this show quite a few times about the rolling stock supply sector and problems with Derby, and then for Alstom, and then similar problems with Hitachi. The supply chain is huge. It's big. The number of people working in the supply chain is bigger than the people that actually work on the, you know, the day to day. And these are real companies with real needs, and you know, they face challenges. And once you lose this capability, if you're not careful, it takes 5 minutes to lose it, and you never get it back. I don't think the industry is looking for, well, it better not be, because it's not going to get like a handout or an easy time. But what they want is a predictable flow of a future plan. The Rail Industry Association, RIA, have been talking about this for ages. They must be part of this process, in my view, because they can actually explain what the supply sector needs. It's really, really important that there is a supply side plan to give the sector some confidence relatively quickly.
And there
Very
never has
important.
been, has there, really?
Not one that seems to have lasted more than 5 minutes. No.
I mean, going right back to the mid-90s when I first went onto rail, one of the things that struck me was the contractors and the suppliers were saying, then just tell us what's coming. We know we're going to have to do it. And if you want us to buy kit, take staff, train apprentices, we need some consistency. But, you know, the pipeline stuff just hasn't happened, as it was supposed to be every year. And I don't think there's been one in 5. You know, there's stuff like that which I think Hendy can, should, and must sort out, and I think he probably will, because I just have a suspicion we're going to see more of a directing mind than anybody's ready for.
Great.
You know, but so what's the really big takeout points then, Richard?
Well, we've just got to mention, I suppose, that the last point in my list of 6, which is reform, and it's interesting that. Well, I've left that to number 6 deliberately, because there's been a view inside the industry, I think, over the last 12 months that unless we reform stuff, things can't happen. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish, right? Don't normally get really cross about things, but I will about this. There's all those other things we've just talked about, all those other 5, can all start to happen despite reform. Reform will make certain things easier. I accept that. But it's not the thing you have to do first. So let's take time and let's get it sorted. Let's get Shadow GBR set up. That was the other thing that was in Louise's plan, right? Step 1, immediate change. We're going to get the Shadow organization set up as soon as we possibly can. That's key, because that is what's going to drive the longer term through. But you can still do a lot of these other things straight away. And
they've got to drive revenue, drive growth, and drive confidence, haven't they? Because success breeds success.
That's a great line. That's exactly right. Yeah, you do those things and it will work. You know, it's funny. When the railway network starts to perform better, it gives the staff morale. The staff morale goes up.
Spring in the step.
Yep. It makes the customers feel better about things. It makes politicians feel better about things. It is the ultimate virtuous circle. So start with getting that performance up. And that is going to require some big decisions, no bigger than sorting out who in the industry is actually going to be leading this.
Directing mind, you know, and the thing about that good feeling you're talking about, a little of it goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Well, so there's the green signals 6-point plan for for Louise and Peter and Lillian, and we wish them all the best though, don't we? There's a massive job on. They've got a lot of energy in there. They've got a lot of goodwill behind them, and let's hope they can make the best of it.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing before we close on this point? Because a lot of people say, well, who can do this? Who can lead this, right? And everybody starts talking about names. I wouldn't start talking about names. There's lots and lots of people in the industry, and they're very, very good people.
Yeah.
I would want the person or the people, the team to give these jobs to are the ones that say, we're going to change. We're going to up the level of pace. We're going to get into absolute action stations, and we're going to basically chuck away the nonsense of the last 10 years, and we're going to get cracking. We might make the odd mistake, but we're going to go for it. They're the ones to go for. The ones that say, oh, it's all quite difficult. You know, we've got all these stakeholders to take it. You know, it's all very hard, but we've got to sort of take it step by step. Them, no, they're not the people. The people are the ones that want to go, let's get this done.
And you and I see them all the time, don't we? You know, you did the Severn Tunnel thing with Nick Millington. There's people like the engineers, Steve Neighbour, Stuart Calvert. Yep. There's lots of people around who just need to be empowered to get on with what they need, what they know needs to be done.
Yeah, they're the people of the future.
They are, and we shall be right behind them and reporting on their successes, hopefully.
We shall. And having got to that point, shall we talk about things that everybody gets very passionate about and do the quiz?
Well,
Oh,
I
come
always enjoy
on.
this. Come on, yeah, let's give it some.
Right, good. Well, last week's quiz question was a riddle, right?
Well, riddle me this and riddle me that.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, right. And my hope was that this was actually going to be really quite tough. And of course, quite a lot
Wrong.
of people. Yeah. Situation normal, as they say. Anyway, here was the quiz question. It was, my first is in copper, but not in gold. My second is in tin, but not in bold. My third is in magnesium, but not in silver. My fourth is in zinc, but not in river. And my fifth is in metal, but not in wood. I am sleek and I am fast, but who am I? The answer was class 55 Deltic, number 7. So depending on your age, it was either 9007, D9007 or 55007, but it was all the same thing. It was, of course, called Pinzer, which is what the riddle was. The winner of the 1953 Epsom Derby. There were a few Deltics which were named after racehorses, hence sleek and fast.
Which continued, of course, the tradition started by the LNER with the A3 Pacifics, which were all named after racehorses.
Absolutely right. And we had a winner. We had quite a few correct answers, but the winner was Andrew Taylor by email. So, Andrew, if you could email us again, please, on info@greensignals.org to tell us where you would like your mug sent. We will get it on its way to you. I have a box of about 4 that are going to get dispatched tomorrow, by the way, for those waiting for mugs. Apologies. It has been mad.
So you're going to have to try harder, Richard, to fox them.
Yeah, well, I've got another anagram this week.
Oh, joy.
Your favourite. Second only to football, I know. Right, so it's this. Where would I be if I were in between deft robots and their coal knots? Coal as in the stuff you burn in power stations, but not for much longer. So where would I be if I were in between deft robots and their coal knots? If you think you know, please email us your answer to info@greensignals.org. You can put it on YouTube, but then, of course, everybody sees it. You've got until midday on Saturday the 13th, is it? I think it must be the 13th. Yeah, Saturday the 13th of July to let us know what your answer is, and then we'll put all the correct ones in and pull one out at random next week.
Which we enjoyed. The quiz is a real good one, isn't it? People always love it somehow. It really hit on something there. Great fun all round. Okay, this is something we don't say that often. This is a great fares story, and we don't get many of them. Northern, yes, Northern is going to offer passengers fares of no more than just £3 for a single journey along the entire route of the new Northumberland Line. Due to open later this summer, for the first time since 1964 will passenger trains traverse its metals, allowing passengers to travel between Ashington, Newsham, Seaton Delaval, Manners and Newcastle, with the full journey taking around 35 minutes and putting Ashington back on the map. I know a football fact about Ashington, the home of the Charlton brothers, wasn't it?
Blimey heck. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a collector's item, a football fact known by Nigel Harris.
Oh,
wow.
And a correct one as well. A simplified single leg pricing structure has been created so that the single is half of a return, with the most expensive return costing £6. The cheapest fare on the line will be just £1.20 to travel from Seaton Delaval to Newsham. Some proper affordable fares there, and a system passengers actually understand. Sounds excellent. Let us wish it well and hope it absolutely overflows with success and provides a model from elsewhere. What say you, Mr. B?
I will second that. It's great. It's really good. I agree. This is a part of the country where there's a few of them, aren't there, where you think, how on earth do we allow that place not to be rail connected? Mansfield used to be one, didn't it, in Nottinghamshire? This is another. This will be great.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So let's wish it well and we'll keep our finger on the pulse. And sadly, that's all we have time for this week. So thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to leave us the thumbs up and please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. More important than anything else, please join us again next week. We absolutely love your company. And it's taking the podcast to great success. Just watch the numbers on YouTube in particular for the viewing figures, which are really encouraging. And we thank you for your success. Steph, Richard and I put a lot into this, and it's incredibly, incredibly satisfying, the results we're getting. And even when we get it wrong, you're very kind to us, so we have nothing to grumble about, do we? So from me, it's goodbye for now, and
it's goodbye from me.
Thanks for being with us. See you next week.